last week, you said survival was the name of the game, that Galway just needed to bring fight to FBD Central Stadium. And that's what they did on Saturday. And they eked out an important win to remain in the championship.
Yeah, sure. Look at Cian. It was all about the win, you know. Look at, nobody's getting carried away. Nobody's under any illusions about how poor the performance was. But look at, you know, they're in the All-Ireland semi-final this weekend, or, you know, next weekend. Cork aren't. You know, really, I suppose it was kind of, as you said, going into the game, it was kind of two teams with a lot of doubts, you know, a lot of question marks. Which team was probably going to turn up better on the day? You know, you could say that Galway, they showed greater, I suppose, worldliness, greater awareness, just managed the game better. And in fairness to them, Cian, like, you know, I suppose there was a period there at the start of the fourth quarter when, like, Cork had got 3 points in a row. They got it back to 1. It looked like, you know, Cork had kind of got control of the game back, that they'd relinquished so early with their shooting. Looked to have momentum at the right time. In fairness to Galway, you know, they got 3 points, pushed it back out to 4. You know, Johnny Cohen got a great score. Joseph Cooney got a brilliant score. Thomas Monaghan got a brilliant score. You know, so, and like all off puck outs as well. And just kind of seemed to just, you know, stop that kind of Cork charge in its tracks. And, you know, Cork, look, it was always going to be, I suppose, a shootout then, and score for score. And, you know, you kind of felt that Cork would need a goal to probably get over the line. Still got it back to 1, but fairness to Galway, Cian, you know, anytime that Cork got a score, like, or came with something, like, Galway just were able to respond and just keep that, you know, just keep that 1 or 2 points of daylight between them. And look at Rode their luck a bit, you know, like, you could say, look at the 2 goals, like, you know, goal after 20 seconds, like the second goal from Conor Whelan, super finish, like, you know, question marks from Cork defence and goalie there. But yeah, look at, it doesn't really matter. And, like, I suppose from Galway's perspective, you know, like, they needed this, like, you know, I suppose even the whole Shefflin project kind of needed a win like this to almost, like, not to get it on the I suppose the place, get it to the place where they feel it can go. Like, so, like, if Galway lost that game on Saturday, Cian, like, you know, you'd be asking serious questions like that on the back of the Leinster final performance. You know, where is this project going? Like, where's, you know, there's no guarantees that it's headed for where they need it to be or where they want it to be, but at least it's going somewhere. And look, they'll take that, and they're going back to Croke Park Sunday week against the Limerick team that they'll physically match up well against. So yeah, look at, they're I wouldn't say they're in a brilliant position, but they're in a decent position, you know.
The quarterfinals generally can be strange type of matches where you'll have a team rebounding after a provincial final loss, and then maybe you might have a team maybe going back a few years who might have acquired a bit of momentum, winning a championship match or two. But for the 4 teams that were on show, now you could maybe take Clare out because they had just drained so much from the Munster final, and that was inevitable. But for the other 3 teams, there seemed to be kind of question marks about them, and there was maybe an edginess to their play, Christy.
Yeah, definitely, Cian. And I suppose, look at the kind of quarterfinals, they're kind of in that kind of no man's land territory, like, you know, and I think that the games kind of collapsed into that kind of trench, really. You know, that was particularly evident in the first half. And, like, you know, I know Cork's conversion rate drove the rate through the floor, but if the average conversion rate of the 4 teams in the first half, like, was 44%, you know, like, Cork's was only 28%. You could see that edginess there. And I suppose, look, you're going to have that when you have the quarterfinals, whereby, you know, teams are coming off the back of disappointing provincial final defeats, like Galway, really poor performance. Clare, brilliant performance, but still, you know, like, not having won, you know, desperate to win a first Munster title since '98, didn't win it. You know, apparently training was flat in a couple of weeks. Like, you know, worried about guys, you know, where their I suppose their energy levels are at. And then the teams that come through the preliminary quarterfinals, like, you know, no disrespect to Antrim or Kerry, like, but, you know, you're wondering, are they really road tested? Are they really kind of warmed up for the heat that, you know, the other teams are going to bring? So yeah, and then as well as that, Cian, I think that the double header, I'm not sure if it works, to be honest with you, because, you know, like, you've obviously the 4 different teams, you know, like, you had a lot of Cork supporters. It was just disappointment, really, you know, leave after their first game. You know, you've kind of you know, great entertainment in the second half, like, but I don't know, I just feel even with the minor games, you know, like, on Friday night and on Sunday. You know, could they have played the, you know, I know Offaly might have objected that, you know, their reason would be, well, why should we be a double header for against a Clare team who have you know, huge crowd there anyway. Tip could say the same on the Sunday with Galway. So if they were to play on the Sunday, so there's all of that stuff going on. I'm just not sure, Cian, if the double header you know, thing works for the quarterfinals. So, you know, that was probably playing into it as well. And you know, as I said, like, you just have, like, all 4 teams are coming in probably just not really sure where they're at. Like, they're not maybe in as good a place as they'd like to be. So yeah, I suppose all of that contributed to that edginess you spoke about, all that maybe nervousness, because you couldn't say really any team, you know, like, you know, none of the 4 teams would have played. Wexford, in fairness to them, played as well as they probably could have until they ran out of bodies, and, you know, Clare just got them, you know, whipped up a tide and they just submerged Wexford, like, and they struggled from there on. But yeah, look at it, because that stage of the championship as well, where it's the first time for all of those teams, you know, they're gone through the round robin. The Munster finally have a second chance. The Leinster finally have a second chance. This is like, you know, it's do or die now, and, you know, you don't have that through the round robin really, unless you're in a game that, you know, you have to win or you're gone. So all of that stuff, yeah, brings it out, Cian. And, you know, as you said, a real kind of an edginess and a kind of a nervousness, and there was a tension even in the games where you could see that was in the ground, that was evident in the play of all 4 teams.
The positive aspect for Galway, Christy, Éanna Murphy made 3 important saves in the first half, and I suppose the tigerish defensive play of Jack Grealish, Dahi Burke, of course, and Darren Morrissey in the full back line, who negated a much vaunted Cork inside line. In fairness, Alan Cadigan did come in, and he caused a few problems, certainly for Galway. Patrick Horgan with a score or 2-2. But your overall assessment of, I suppose, Éanna Murphy first, by putting on your goalkeeper's hat, and then just how Galway dealt with Cork's attack.
Yeah, like, first of all, I'm delighted for Éanna, because, you know, he kind of took a bit of stick during the year, like, you know, maybe some of his performances, and took a bit of stick after drawing or the Kilkenny game in Pearse Stadium. But yeah, look at, you know, he did really well. You could argue that he was man of the match. He was the most important player on the pitch, you know, especially for his even puck outs in the second half. So, like, you know, yeah, like, I suppose from a Cork perspective, Cian, you could argue that, you know, and you always have to look at every aspect of you know, when there are goal chances created and not taken, like, a lot of it is down to execution. And, you know, you could argue that Alan Connolly could have taken the ball in further, kind of hit the ball straight at Éanna. Robbie as well, like, brilliant shot, but, you know, you'd expect a goalie of his class to kind of keep it out from that distance. And Dara, in fairness, Dara Fitzgibbon could have taken in a bit more, probably bounced the ball, you know, too far out in front of him, which gave him a chance to popped up nicely. So, but he still had to make that save. So yeah, and then look at it. If 2 of those 3 go in, Cian, it's a totally different game. Like, Cork were chasing the game throughout, like, chasing the game much longer than they expected and they intended to. So, yeah, look at, for fairness to the Galway defence, like, you know, that there is good pace in, you know, 2 cornerbacks of good pace. You know, like, you know, physically as well. Like, you know, if you look at, I suppose, the Cork forwards, you know, they're like, you know, the 3 best forwards going into the game were Robbie O'Flynn, Conor Lehane, Seamus Harnedy, like, just, you know, out-muscled. Like, Lehane, 2 possessions, Seamus Harnedy, 6 possessions over the 70 minutes, whatever he was on. 1 shot was blocked down. So, like, you know, Robbie, in fairness, could have had a couple of goals, got 3 points. But yeah, like, from a Cork perspective, like, even in the first half, I think, like, the Cork forwards had 23 possessions in total, which wasn't really enough, like, you know, considering the volume of kind of possession that Cork had. Like, they had a lot of ball, like, they had you know, dominance on puck outs, dominance on the Galway puck out. Like, they did have a lot more possession, 41 possessions in the second half, but, like, you know, at that stage, kind of Galway had found their kind of range a bit. And I suppose really from Galway's perspective, like, that, you know, I suppose there has been maybe an over-reliance on Conor Whelan. Still was really good. I think he had only 6 possessions in the game. You know, devastating when he was in possession. Obviously 1-2, worked like an absolute Trojan all day. But, like, I suppose Galway were able to, you know, Kieran Joyce was sitting back that bit deeper. after Wheelo got his second point just after half time. Galway were able to rely on their long range shooting. And it was good. Like their conversion rate overall was 62%, which was good. The context of Cork's was only 46%. And even in the second half, Galway had only, Cork had only one more shot in the second half, 22-21. So in fairness to Galway, Cork should have been ahead at half time. But Galway found their, I suppose they got that foothold in the game. And I just think that they managed it better and they saw it out and they rode their luck, and Cork hit the post a couple of times, could have had a 65, could have had a free, all of that stuff. But there's a lot of experience in that Galway team still. A lot of guys with All-Ireland medals, and I think when it came down to it, that ultimately told, especially when you look at what Cork, they're still trying to get over that line, and they're still trying to win that All-Ireland. And I think for Cork, there has been serious inconsistency in the squad for a long time. And you look at the two best teams in the country this year have been Clare and Limerick, because they've been the most consistent. Every day they've gone out, they've been right at it. You could argue that Clare weren't the last day, but they still found that consistency and that standard when they needed to. And for Cork, it just hasn't been there. Wasn't there in the championship. You could argue that they kind of, got a break when Waterford obviously maybe miscalculated and didn't trust Cork enough and overtrained, and Cork got a break and got back into a groove with that way. But you wouldn't say Waterford or Tip were really at the level that you could judge Cork fully. Antrim scored 219, and those inconsistencies that we've seen all year, Cian, they were smeared right across the performance again on Saturday, and ultimately it's that inconsistency which has brought Cork down again.
Christy, as we said there at the start, you were saying we don't know where this Galway project is going yet, but in the first year of a project with a new management team, is getting to the last final par for the course, or is it an actual achievement that you can say that's an achievement and they can build on from that going on into the coming years? Yeah,
well, you look at Colm, a county like Galway, with Henry Sheffin on board, he's not coming up to Galway to really build a team, or he's coming up to get the team to the championship. He's coming up to win an All-Ireland, nothing else. Guys like him, he's a winner all his life. He's traded in All-Irelands throughout his career. Doesn't believe in anything less. Anything else in Kilkenny than All-Ireland is seen as a failure. That's the standard they operate at. So, for Henry, I suppose he's had to kind of regenerate the team, but it's still very much the same. The same players. All those players have, he's regenerated, or he's I suppose Thomas Monaghan and Jack Grealish are two prime examples of guys that been taken from the wilderness and have really good championships. Like Thomas obviously wasn't great in the Leinster final, but Jack was man of the match the last day. Has had a good season. So look at he's there now, but they're in a semi-final now. They're there against Limerick, and they look at, I suppose, from a Galway perspective, there's a couple of things you need to take on if you're going to take on Limerick. You need physicality, power. Clare have shown that. The one team that have consistently matched up to Limerick this year. You can go back to the league game in March, which they drew. I think there's been a realisation as well that there has been a bit of a throwback in this championship, whereby, I think Cork, it's been proven with Cork that they tried to run the ball through that swarm in the middle third against Limerick back in April, gobbled up. I think there was kind of a realisation that, look, you're not going to get away with this, and that there has been a throwback in terms of more man-on-man stuff, more, win your own ball. And I suppose to do that, Colm, you need the power and the physicality and, the level of, I suppose, just massive athleticism around the pitch that Galway have. So, to take on Limerick, you need all of that. You need power on the middle. You need pace in your full back line, which Galway have now with their two cornerbacks. So, look, they're in a decent position. I think they're in a much better position to take on Limerick than Cork would have been, because, Cork, what were they really going to come with different that they didn't produce in the last couple of years? So, from a Galway perspective, they've beaten Limerick in their last two league games. I know you could argue that Limerick were poor in the league this year. It didn't really matter. They beat them last year as well. They ran them close in 2020 when Colm Gannon went off on a hamstring early. Joe Canning went off know, the game was nearly level with when time was up. And I know that you could argue if you're to look at that team or look at that game in fine detail and go through the you know, the expected points difference and all of that stuff, you could say Limerick deserved to win it by 9 or 10 points, but there's still you know, in Galway, there's still a real hurt there from the 2018 final as well, and that Galway just didn't show up. They didn't perform at all, nowhere near the levels they could have, and yet they still could have won that game. So there's all of this stuff coming in. And I think deep down as well, Colm, Limerick are probably, or Galway are probably the one of the few teams that Limerick would prefer to see gone, you know. So yeah, look, at all to play for. It's going to take a massive Galway performance. And I suppose the one thing that would worry me really goes back to the point I was making about Cork there a few minutes ago, is that, like, you know, I think a county that's trying to win that All-Ireland, like Cork, for example, you know, you just need, everything needs to be going right. You go back to Galway when they won the All-Ireland 17, you know, they were right at it from the whole year. Like, they poor result against Wexford in the league early on, and after that then everything was like on the money. You know, they won the league. They were very, very consistent throughout the championship, which is what I think you need for a county like that, is trying to get up and get over the line. And I suppose that's the one concern you would have, like, is that, you know, Limerick being ultra consistent all year, Clare being very, very consistent. Galway, you couldn't say so. So, you know, can they override all of that stuff? That's the big question, Colm.
And speaking of Clare there, obviously a great win against Wexford, come from behind after the disappointment of going so close to the Munster Championship. But, like, obviously it didn't start off as well as they wanted, and they were behind for a long time, but they showed great resilience to come back again and go to the line and put themselves in the semi-final against Kilkenny, which unusually they're probably going to be favourites going to against Kilkenny, you know, the way the times have changed.
Yeah, look at their, like, I suppose we spoke about it here last week, Colm, you know, that it was a dangerous, treacherous game for Clare, you know, especially all the energy and, you know, I suppose mental and physical energy that expended against Limerick in the Munster final. And, you know, by all accounts, training, I think, was a bit flat in a couple of weeks, and, you know, they had a few injury concerns. This, you know, the suspensions thing hanging over them as well, where would the lads get off or not? So all of that just fed into, you know, I suppose that Clare weren't operating maybe at the level that they needed to be. And I think nobody was under any illusion to try and get back to that same standard that they produced in the Munster final was going to be nearly impossible so soon again. But yeah, look at I suppose from Clare's perspective, that their conversion rate was poor for most of the game. Like, you know, their place ball striking was poor. Like, Tony missed the first 3 frees.
He's human.
Yeah, exactly. But look at they found it. Like, you know, you look at, you know, you could argue that Tony Kelly, Cian O'Connell weren't really in the game, but, like, when the game was decided, like in the last 10 minutes, like, the two boys had 3 points, 3 assists. You know, like, Peter Duggan came up with big plays in the last 15 minutes. Like, they got 1-4 off the bench. You know, like, in fairness to Clare, it's a brilliant way to be going into the All-Ireland semi-final, in that they didn't play well, but they found a way and they got momentum. And look at, you could argue now that the Munster final disappointment is out of their system. They flushed that out. You know, they've overcome, I suppose, the risk that was there. And now, yeah, but the big thing, Colm, is they're going back to Croke Park for only the second time since the All-Ireland final in 2013 replay. So
amazing.
That's, you know, I heard Dermot Ryan saying, Clare FM there the other day, that it was a dream of his to go to Croke Park. And, you know, it's hard to believe, like, that, you know, most of these Clare boys, you know, obviously the main guys like Tony, Shane, you know, a lot of these guys have been in Croke Park and have thrived there. Like, but a lot of the Clare heads haven't been there, and, you know, like, only there once since 2013, you know, draw against Galway in 18. Like, so, yeah, look at Clare Field at Croke Park is their pitch. So brilliant to be going back there. And you know, I think massive challenge, like, that performance won't be anywhere near good enough to beat Kilkenny, but, you know, the improvement, there's room for improvement. I think Clare will find it.
Finally, Christy, and I know we'll go into the semi-finals in greater detail next week, but it's brilliant to have that weekend of hurling upcoming at Croke Park, where you'll have the 2 semi-finals, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. And I suppose during the pandemic, when you had games behind closed doors or with limited crowds, it was these type of occasions are what people craved. And it's just nice that you're going to have a weekend's hurling at GAA headquarters. Yeah,
like, and I think, you know, when they first brought this in 2018, you know, we were wondering, like, you know, there was the Clare Galway game on the Saturday night and the Cork Limerick game on the Sunday. We were kind of wondering, like, I suppose, look, we're all, you know, a bit selfish, and we're saying, geez, why don't they have them over 2 weekends? And, You know, we'd go up to Dublin this weekend and we go back up next weekend. But I do think the format works, like, and you know, it's it gives, I suppose, like obviously a lot of people traveling, maybe you have to look at hotels, and that's not ideal. Like, but yeah, it's kind of like a celebration, really, of, you know, you have two massive games, like, and you know, just, I suppose, all of that. You have you know, I suppose going to Croke Park as well. Like, let's be honest about it, Cian, there isn't that many hurling games in Croke Park, like outside of the Leinster games, Leinster final. Like, you know, Dublin don't play their home matches in Croke Park. So, like, if you were to actually look at it, like, you could count on one hand the amount of hurling games you've had in Croke Park in the last 2 years, you could say. You know, like, it's like, I know, we'll say Galway have played there, they played Wexford there in 2020. But like, so really, for as I mentioned earlier, like, for Clare, like, this is their first time going back there in 4 years. Their second time going back there in nearly 10 years. So, like, yeah, I think it's great in that sense. And yeah, look at, from, you know, you have two evenly matched games, although Limerick are obviously favourites. But, and the other thing as well is, like, you have the Munster Leinster kind of, you know, contest there again, where, you know, you've had two Munster teams in the last two finals. You know, the last, like, 17, 18, 20, you had three Munster finalists, or three Munster teams. You know, like, your Munster won the last 4 All-Irelands in a row, which is the first time that's happened in over 60 years. Like, when, you know, I think it's 6 winners in a row. So, you know, like, you could have argued that if you were to go back to the last 50 minutes to go last Saturday, like, it looked like there was going to be 3 Leinster teams in the semi-finals, you know, which was the first time that would have ever happened, like, since Galway came into Leinster. So, yeah, like, and look at, everyone is talking about, you know, it's odds on to be another Clare Limerick final, and kind of Clare Limerick Mark 3. Like, you know, I wouldn't actually rule out another Cody Shefflin Mark 3 either, like, because, you know, like, that, you know, you could argue that, is the standard as great as people think it is? Like, I'm not sure. If you look at the Munster Championship, lads, you know, and this has been a trend really for the last few years. Like, it's a lot of poor stuff. Like, you know, Waterford collapsed in the last 2 games. Tip lost their 4 games. You know, like, take out Clare and Limerick, really, like, you could say that the standard has been average out. Like, now you have, obviously, the 2 best teams in the province are in the semi-finals. You could say, like, the Leinster final was not good stuff. You know, there's an argument to be made as well, is, like, is the Munster Championship and the Leinster, is it really comparable? Because a lot of the matches in Leinster, maybe in smaller grounds, Croke Park doesn't lend itself for atmosphere for a final. And you could say, like, that the best games in Leinster maybe were the Kilkenny Wexford game, which is in, you know, Nolan Park, brilliant atmosphere. You know, the Galway Wexford game, the Dublin Wexford game were in Wexford Park. So, you know, there's all of that stuff going on, and I suppose, look, we'll know more. Like, you know, like, good atmosphere doesn't always equate to quality. So we'll find out more next week, lads, of where the whole Munster Leinster kind of divide really is. And you know, are we going to have 2 Munster teams in the final for the 3rd year in a row? Like, I suppose that's probably what everyone is expecting, but I wouldn't be putting my bottom dollar on that one either, you know.
Galway and Clare will do us, Christy, and we look forward to previewing the action next week.